Hello, everyone. I saw Unexpected Maker say, let's go, so I thought I would. If you're watching this after the live stream, make sure and check the description below on YouTube for time codes so you can skip around. We're going to take a few minutes just to get going here. So sit tight. I'll say hello and answer any questions. But I could also answer questions later as well. Hello, Unexpected Maker. Hello, Dishipu. Hello, David. Hello, Beata. Hello, Charles. Thanks for stopping by. Hello, Dave. Good afternoon. On this chill Friday. Hello, Anthony. Congrats to your family edition coming up. Thank you. Due date's 3 weeks from today, so it's coming up. Hey, Sue Grover. Hello, George. AKA Hams Labs. Hi, Ivan. Yvonne. Hopefully I said it okay. Hello, Jim. Thank you all. Hello, Bad Abby. Bad Abby asks, is this the last one? This is the last one that I'm doing, but FoamyGuy is planning on streaming in this slot going forwards. At least for a little while until I come back. Hello, Michael. Hello, X-Micron. So I'm not actually not working for the next 3 weeks-ish. I'm basically in this mode of like, when the baby comes, I'll stop working. And I didn't want to like schedule things out. So I thought it would be nicer to just tie a bow on it for me streaming for a little while. And then I'll post on the blog plans on coming back to streaming whenever that is. Hello, Keith EE. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, X-Micron, and hello, Michael. I don't know if I said hi to you, so I will. Hey, Johnny. Thank you all for hopping in. Should be cool. Should be chill. Hi, Dinkelberg. We'll wait a few more minutes and then get going. Charles says, do you know if it's a boy or a girl? We do, but we're not saying. Trying to go gender neutral as much as we can. Yeah, if I'm a little slow today, I was up later than planned last night. But I think that's going to be the state for most of this year is not getting enough sleep. So anytime I don't sleep well, I'm like, this is what it's going to be like when we have a kid. And I have lots and lots of USB cables and USB devices on my desk right now, let me tell you. Hey, Bruce. Unexpected baker. Yeah. It won't be a surprise to us, but we'll see. We haven't had an explicit talk about how public we'll be with our baby, so we'll have to figure that out. Whether I would like show the baby on Show&Tell or not. Linux203 says, hello, congratulations and good luck. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm trying to shift my brain to doing more smaller projects in terms of CircuitPython. Trying to get there. I did get the Xilinx, the Zinc chip, and I put it away, but it's like where I can see it when I come in, and so it's teasing me a little bit. But that is not on my to-do list, or at least not my Adafruit to-do list. All right, I've successfully procrastinated until it's 2 o'clock. So maybe we just get the show on the road. Let me pull it up. Baby on deep dive hosting. Yeah. We'll see. Oh, you know, I have overhead. I was going to say that both cats are in here again. Hope you have a healthy baby. Me too. Me too. Everything's been looking good so far. So far so good. Yeah, these kitties are zonked out like I'm a little tired too. Instead of cat cam, it'll be baby cam. Why not both? There's a third bed there. We could just put the... No, not a firm flat surface. At least not at the start. Hi, Patrick, by the way. Hello, Mark. Okay, let's get going. There, that's the camera I thought I was on instead of the desktop. So hello, everyone. If you're new to this, thanks for hanging out while we just chit-chatted. My name is Scott. I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. If you don't know what those things are, CircuitPython is a version of Python designed to run on its own on little tiny computers called microcontrollers. And they will, they're really inexpensive, so they're a great first computer. And they don't have a lot of layers and abstraction and complexity, so they're great to learn computers with. Adafruit is the folks that pay me to work on CircuitPython, and they are an open source hardware and software company with a focus on education and kind of teaching technology to folks. And Adafruit does that by writing guides that tell people like, or give tutorials on how to do stuff. And then a lot of the materials are little electronics components that Adafruit then sells on Adafruit.com. So if you want to support me, you can do that by supporting Adafruit by purchasing stuff from Adafruit.com. Hello, Maiko. So we've got two chats on the right-hand side here. We've got YouTube on the bottom and the Discord on the middle. If you want to join the Discord, it's a great chat because it sticks around throughout the week. And I hang out there and a bunch of other cool folks hang out there. So if you want to join that, you can go to the URL adafru.it/discord. And we'd love to see you there. That's a great place, especially if you're starting to get contributing in CircuitPython. That's a really good place to go. This is a deep dive. It happens every week. I'm not sure. So this is my last one, last deep dive for a while. I'm, as I've said before, I'm expecting a baby 3 weeks from today, and I'm planning on that. So I'm going to go on paternity leave and whenever the baby comes. So this will be my last deep dive that I'm doing until I figure out what parenting is and come back to work and stuff like that. So it'll be a little while before I do it again. But this time slot, Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, FoamyGuy, who also is a part-timer for Adafruit and just an awesome streamer as well. FoamyGuy is going to be taking this slot and on Adafruit. So he'll be streaming next week, I think, starting next week at this 2 p.m. Time slot. Arjan says, congratulations, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited. So yeah, this is my last deep dive for a while, but this time slot will have somebody streaming. So please join the stream next week with FoamyGuy. I might actually try to hop in the chat and watch the stream too, because FoamyGuy also streams on Saturdays, and I'm pretty strict about when I do work and when I don't do work. But because this is the slot that I usually stream myself, I think I'm going to try to be in the chat for FoamyGuy next week. So yeah, please help with that. Unexpected Maker says, dude, I've been parenting for 13 years and I'm still trying to work out what parenting is and how. Yeah. And Beata says, my dad is 80 and he's still figuring out what parenting is. So I guess that's not the right way to put it. It's more like what sort of time I can set aside for it. And I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about is like, what my work schedule is going to be once I'm taking care of a kid, and what Adafruit's going to need from me, and whether it's streaming and all that. So the way I'm approaching it is just kind of like not committing myself to anything and keeping my options open. And then we'll go from there. So yeah, FoamyGuy's taking over the slot, which is great. And in fact, FoamyGuy is going to try to join the stream in about an hour. and we're going to chit chat. And so those of you who haven't seen FoamyGuy before, this will be kind of a chance for us to, one, I haven't really chatted with FoamyGuy one-on-one before, and so I thought that would be kind of a cool way to kind of like hand off the time slot. And I'm not sure what like he's calling it or anything, what he's calling his stream and stuff, but it's a lot of CircuitPython work that FoamyGuy is doing, so it's definitely similar. So if you have questions for FoamyGuy, store those up and we can ask them in an hour or so. Hopefully that works out. Let's see. I talked about that. The last thing I want to talk about is just that there are notes. There are notes docs. Yeah, the cats are tired. They're zonked. Notes are available on GitHub. You can go to github.com/adafruit/deep-dive-notes. And that's great. Thank you again to David, DCD, for taking notes of this stream. And then thank you to Patrick for curating those into that repo, which makes it really easy to search the repo, find a topic you want to do, and then click the link to jump around in it. So yeah, thank you to them. Keith E says his Saturday streams are awesome. I'm thrilled for the Friday slot. Yeah. And Bad Abby says deep dive with FoamyGuy. I did let FoamyGuy know that I was like okay if he wanted to call it that, but I also want to respect the fact that like his Saturday streams are like outside of Adafruit work that he's doing. So I want to make sure that he preserves his separate brand if that's what he wants as well. And C. Grover says there's a bunch of we'll see how it's going in the parenting realm. Yeah. So I guess I feel like I'm a little bit on top of things in the in the sense that I'm trying not to set my expectations to anything particular. Hello, Paul. I don't think I said hi to you. How do you yet? Okay. So we got about an hour. We'll see when FoamyGuy pings me and kind of, you know how I do it with Lady Ada, and I just drag it over, and hopefully I'll be able to pop the video out. That didn't work last time, so I couldn't actually watch the Discord chat as we were chatting. But yeah, I thought we'll see. We'll see. Wading into the deep end with FoamyGuy. FoamyGuy does a lot of library stuff too, and graphics, which is not my strength. So yeah, I'm excited about it. FoamyGuy's an awesome contributor in CircuitPython, so I'm happy to see him take over the slot and hopefully find more folks that like to watch his streams as well. Okay, so while folks are brainstorming titles in the chat, perfect. I was just going to say, I do also love to answer questions. I try to do my best, and folks in the chat will answer them as well. And Karam in YouTube just asked a question, so that is where I'll start. And if folks have other questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I was going to talk more about USB host and its status and stuff like that. But first, I'll answer this question. Do you have any tips for an electrical engineer that wants to be a hardware development engineer? I don't know the difference. So my background is actually mostly software. I am a computer engineer. My degree is computer engineering, which is a little bit more hardware than it is theoretical computer science. But I've been doing software for a decade or more. I pretend to be an electrical engineer. I don't really know the difference between electrical engineer and hardware development engineer, so I can't really answer that. But maybe some folks in the chat have a better answer for that. Hey, Jordy. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so if folks have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to get distracted and we can go off in the weeds. That's kind of our thing. That's the thing that we do here. Derek says, are we building a whole USB PHY stack in Python? No. So, well, no. So a lot of this USB host works derived from the example of using the the RP2040's PIO for doing USB, which is kind of like Phi. What we're looking at doing is, so for USB host, we are doing kind of like a lower level, we're doing a lower level API where you can just read and write endpoints, and then kind of building what I don't think is the Phi stack, but more like the USB class layer. So like all the device specific layer in Python. It's kind of what we're looking at. Electrical engineers build nuclear suns. I mean, there's also nuclear engineers. Oh, 220 volts versus small electronics. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, let me show you just what I was working on. So last week, I think, and I probably talked about this last week as well, my plan was kind of to target the PyUSB API in CircuitPython, which means that you'll be able to port kind of from the CircuitPython world up, and then if you're careful and working in Linux, you could write drivers without needing CircuitPython. And so I've been collaborating with Tack, who is the maintainer paid by Adafruit. So if you like Tinyusb, so Tinyusb is an open source C library that does it does both device and host support. There's class level support for both of those things, but they are the host stuff, that the host API we want is kind of like under the class level stuff. So classes are basically like mass storage, CDC, which is used for serial, and then also like HID, which is human interface device. So, whoa. Most of our teachers teach for 1,000 kilowatts, but I love PCBs and microprocessors and that kind of stuff, but I have no idea what to learn next. Learn.adafruit.com is a great resource for all of the stuff that we do, and that's largely, I learned a little bit of, I had 2 electrical engineering classes in college, and those were, that's where I learned like capacitors and resistors and like Ohm's law and like the basics of that stuff. But I always learn by projects as well. So learn.adafruit.com is a great place to just like you can, let me show the desktop. So the way that I like to learn a lot is just by projects. So you can go to learn.adafruit.com and just kind of see all of the different projects and products and kind of just start with what looks kind of fun to do. So like this nunchuck laser controlled cat toy. This is admin stuff, so you wouldn't normally see it. But it shows you what the featured products are. And again, this is like how Adafruit makes money. But then, you know, we support it as well. So you can see the like code that goes along with it, and we tell you how to load it up and all that. So this is a great way to learn it, I think, as well. Keith says, just starting with some microcontrollers is incredibly helpful and a great place to start if you're coming from a power systems EE place. My path was EE to signal analysis to bioinformatics to programming. So while I parade as an EE, I'm not much of one anymore. That said, learning about embedded programming is hugely helpful. Learn.adafruit.com and click the dice. Do I know what the dice do? These dice. Oh, cool. Yeah, you want to learn what a tilt sensor is. That's pretty neat. Yeah, so I think, I mean, it depends on how you learn, but I'm pretty self-driven when it comes to learning, so that's not to say that I learned all on my own. It's that I can learn from projects and tutorials like this. I'm showing secret info. Yeah, maybe. Okay, so let me show you what I was working on. So So I've actually made pretty good progress with the USB host stuff. I have kind of like all of the shared bindings set out, and I think I talked about this last week. And I've got the ability to plug in a device and see the USB PID and VID, which are like the vendor and product IDs. And then I can also see, I got working today the strings for the product, the manufacturer, and the serial number. But I had to fix some things in Tinyusb. I was hoping that, like, the way that Tack and I work kind of is like, I do some work and then I do a PR with it to Tinyusb, and then Tack changes it the way that he wants and then merges it. Unfortunately, what he merged last night was good, and I switched to it, but it wasn't quite working. So I fixed it and I made another PR. But I'm actually hoping that I can start doing PRs into CircuitPython for all of this USB host stuff, because Tack is also going to be working on the read and write endpoint stuff. So what I thought would be interesting is, and useful for me, is just to write some Python code that I can run on my computer here that interacts with some basic devices here as a like kind of a proof of concept testing examples for CircuitPython USB host as well. I learned almost everything outside of school. It's been nice for me to have like this school has the advantage of like a common knowledge base. So they cover like a broad range of topics just so that you've seen them. But yeah, I learn a lot outside of it as well. So let me show you what I've got here so far. So here's an example that I was doing, and this is just for a basic mouse. So I've got this like, let me unplug it and untangle it. Holding up USB devices when I have way too many cables on my desk. So this is what I've got. I've got this like very classic, I used to love these mice. They're the like Microsoft optical mice. It's got the like 2 buttons and the scroll wheel. And so that's what I'm testing with here. Oh, nice. Sounds like you're on your way. FPGAs and VHDLs. I learned that in some of my computer science courses where they were like taught us how a CPU works. It really did not stick though. I had no interest in it. I have a lot more interest in it now. Hello, James. Welcome. How about before you went to university, were you involved in electronics as early as you can remember? So my background is I've always been lucky that my dad had a computer. So I've always been around computers, but I didn't really start programming them until I was a teenager. I played video games and I wanted to make video games. And then when I started like doing some web programming, and I kind of discovered that I found programming even more fun than video games. So I did a lot of PHP and then Python before I went to university. Had I done C? I don't think I had done C. I did Java at university and then did some C in college. And then I worked at Google outside of that and did a bunch of C++. And now I basically do C. But I've always kind of like had Python be my like project. Oh no, a Microsoft mouse. What's wrong with a Microsoft mouse? These like Microsoft has made great peripherals for a long, long time, in my opinion. Okay, so what I've got here is this is like a very basic example for PyUSB. So PyUSB is this usb.core import. Array is a Python thing, and sys I'm not actually using. And one of the things that I've been thinking about with this API is so CircuitPython will implement a subset of the API that PyUSB provides. And I think the distinguishing thing in my mind is that like I want in CircuitPython to be able to kind of assume that you know more about the device that you're using. Know more about the device that you're using. You don't have to do a lot of dynamic, like figure out what you're talking to. So two folks have follow-up questions that are related. So do you learn embedded C? How did microcontrollers get in your programming life? So I worked at Google for almost 6 years outside of college. That I graduated college in 2009, and then I left Google in June of 2015, and I was very into. Oh, I find them annoying in my hand. I see. I don't use it anymore. I use a trackball now. So I left Google in 2015. I was on the Maps team. I did Maps rendering and Maps styling for those 6 years. And then I got really practiced at C++. And then I wanted to start my own company doing flight controllers for drones, for like quadcopters, because I was really into quadcopters at the time. And so that's what got me into microcontrollers and embedded, is I was designing my own PCBs, which I'd never done before. So I learned a lot of that about that, and I learned a lot of that from Adafruit actually, and just watching stuff. Yeah, so FoamyGuy will be at about 3, which is about 40 minutes from now, is when we talked about him joining. So that was with STM stuff using baseflight, or not baseflight, betaflight and cleanflight, which is like, I don't know if I've told this story before, but like it's an interesting relationship of projects, just like CircuitPython and MicroPython. So there's this open source flight controller software. So a flight controller on a quadcopter, its job at most basic is to, one, keep the quadcopter stable. So using an IMU, like an accelerometer and gyroscope, take in the motion of the craft and then determine how fast each of the 4 propellers should be moving in order to be stable, to actually stay in the air. And then what you mix in with that is you then mix in like the remote control signals so that you can actually like fly forwards and backwards and do all sorts of stuff like that. So there is open source project called baseflight that did that. That was kind of controlled by one person, and another person wanted, and I don't think they were that nice. So baseflight got forked into cleanflight, and somebody did that and then got distracted making hardware, and then another person who is a like more aggressive like quadcopter pilot forked cleanflight into betaflight and maintained that, and that was more aggressive, more experimental. So it's like all these projects that like were kind of related to each other, that were all based on like the same kind of baseflight source. And then but they like, one didn't necessarily supplant another. They were all kind of, I don't know about baseflight, but cleanflight and betaflight were like both kind of being worked on at the same time. So it should feel familiar in terms of like our CircuitPython's relationship to MicroPython. And that's kind of like one of the reasons I knew that like projects can work like this, for sure. What a coincidence we have a project about drones. Yeah, so what I discovered about that is that kind of like in the same way that I liked programming more than gaming on its own, I kind of found that I liked the embedded hardware, the simplicity of it, the simplicity of the programming of a microcontroller, really appealing. And then the rest of the story is that I did that project for about a year. And I started my own company called Chickadee Tech. And at the end of it, I had an idea of how long it could not work. And I like made the products. I did a production run with Macrofab and started selling it, and was just like, I don't want to actually do this. Like, I like the engineering, but I don't like all of the support, and product market fit is really hard. Like, my stuff was a lot, like, kind of pricey compared to where other things were going. So I was looking for a job, and I went on Show&Tell, which I had been going on. So Adafruit Show&Tell, and basically said, like, I'm looking for a job. And they emailed me after I said I was a software person, and they said, hey, like, Micropython's a thing. Do you want to get it working on our hardware? And it was a very similar task to what I had been doing with the flight controller software, where I was taking existing code and trying to move it to somewhere else. And I had been doing Python for over a decade. I love Python, so it was a great fit. It was my love for embedded plus my love for Python, and I'm still working on it. And CircuitPython came out of that work, obviously. And yeah, the domain is this chickadee.tech. Polystack was the system I was working on, and I don't keep my stuff up to date. But yeah, here's the board, one of the boards I designed. The idea being that you could like create this stack of things. And one of the challenges was like, how many UARTs do you break out? How many I2C do you break out? And I actually wrote a Python program to lay out the connections over this high density connector. Is there a better? Yeah, so this explains like how it works, is that like you have like 8 slots for UARTs, and if one of the layers takes it up, you shift the rest over, which I thought was kind of neat. So that's what it kind of looks like when it's cleanly mounted on, like, this is the frame of a quadcopter. But yeah, it was definitely too complicated. It's definitely too complicated, but it's what got me into embedded, and KiCad and manufacturing and stuff. So I still enjoy doing the hardware side of things as well, although I don't do it all that often. But yeah, so that was kind of like how I got in more deeply involved in hardware stuff. And then Adafruit's been a great spot for me to work, because I can focus on the engineering, something that's really cool and really like beginner friendly and stuff. And have a lot of, like, Phil and Lamore, Lamore owns Adafruit, also known as Lady Ada. Yeah, they give me a lot of freedom to work on what I'm interested in too, which is really, really nice. Yeah, it is crazy tough selling things if you're in it for the engineering side. Yep. Yeah, and making a living off of it particularly. So I opted not to do that. And software consulting basically is what I'm doing now, just for Adafruit, and like it's much more lucrative, and I can focus on the things that. Oh yeah, Johnny says it was really interesting following his struggles on Show&Tell. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got the job, as I was going to Show&Tell every week talking about it. Too complicated is what we live for, isn't it? I try to not be too complicated, but I think it was well engineered for a problem that didn't matter. Or like a problem that didn't exist. And that's the hard part. That's not the engineering hard part. It's the, yeah. But yeah, so Chickadee Tech still exists. This is the company that actually Adafruit pays for me, because I'm technically a freelancer for them. So they pay Chickadee Tech, and Chickadee Tech got a lot more profitable once I stopped doing hardware stuff. But yeah, CircuitPython's been great. I've been loving working on it, and there's just so many things in the embedded world to learn, and USB host is one of those. Do you have any experience with telecom or signals? What do you think about that kind of stuff? I don't have a lot of experience with, like, signal processing. I'm very weak with. I never took like the signal processing course, like DSP, so I did some of the audio work. I was just kind of like, I can't quite, I don't fully understand what I'm doing here. So yeah. Scooter says, hello, I'm also Scott. Thanks for tackling all my CircuitPython PRs. No problem. One thing I've committed to from the get-go with CircuitPython is being responsive to people who want to contribute. So keep it coming. Hopefully it'll stay that way even when I'm on leave. I will not be doing reviews when I'm on leave because I will not be working, but hopefully other folks will. Interesting to hear your background. Any CircuitPython quadcopters out there? Not that I know of. I wouldn't recommend. So one of the challenges with, yeah, quadcopter stuff is very much signal processing, where you're trying to read in signals from the gyro and accelerometer and like produce signals. It's like, it's definitely not my strength, and to do it, you need to be very regular with your math and your computation, and like CircuitPython would not be good for doing that control loop. But you could theoretically, like if you had like a dual core, you could run the tight control on one core and then do whatever you would do with CircuitPython on the other. But yeah, I'm not sure what CircuitPython quadcopter means anyway. But I wouldn't use CircuitPython for control loops because control loops generally need to be fast, especially ones that are for quads. Like they're talking like 32 kilohertz control loops. So 32,000 times a second, you're doing that computation of like, what should things be? That was interesting. It's always great when your work lines up with your passions and what you're best at. It's interesting because my hobby became my job. And so it was a question of like, what's my hobby now? Which is why I've been doing like some more of the broadband civic stuff as well. And George is offering to be a reference for telecom and digital signal processing, who's Ham's Lab on Discord. So yeah, I recommend everybody join the Discord. I'll drop the link in the chat, in the YouTube chat. Yeah, it's a great. Mark says, I'm always a bit worried about my hobby becoming my job. When I was straight up dev, I stopped almost all my home dev work. Yeah, what I find is like the world of computers is really big, and so if I spend all day doing like microcontroller debugging and see that like my hobby would be more like terrible Python code that does web scraping. It's kind of been where I've gone. The FPGA stuff is still really interesting to me, and I want to do that at some point as well. I tend to wander projects, and being paid to do work kind of, I have to keep myself on track a bit more than other times. If you ask Lady Ada, she'd say I do wander sometimes still, but as long as I get my code committed before I wander onto something else, it's not as bad. Okay, so let me go through this example. So this was kind of nice. I just like hammered this out. Some people work until they're pensioners and then they have no hobby as their work was their hobby. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it changes when I have a kid to take care of too. Oh, Scooter is a FPGA engineer with a background in circuit design, PCB design, and also dabble in software. Thank you. Yeah, I have ideas on what I want to do with FPGAs. I really like the Python level stuff is really neat. Like generating bit streams from Python is kind of cool, but I would love to have, and maybe you know this, I was thinking it would be cool if there was a way for us to use, so imagine that you have an FPGA. So like I've got this Zinc imagine if we put like a bus in it, and then we can like combine pre-built bit streams to like set what you want in different parts of it, if that makes sense, right? So like you have a memory bus and it has like 3 peripherals off it. Could you like denote the 3 areas of the FPGA for those 3 and then like patch them in? I thought could be kind of neat. Minnesota Mentat says, enjoy all your work, return quickly. So the plan is that I will take 6 weeks off at the start, and then I will take another 12 weeks off when my partner goes back to work. So this first bit that I'm out will be 6 weeks. Maybe we should, do we have an FPGA channel on Discord? Maybe we should have it. Pierre says, during your off time and between baby asks, which hobby will you focus on? Good question. I don't know. I'm curious to see what I end up doing, but it might just be video games, because video games can kind of be pretty efficient. Our college uses ARM4 based TI for embedded courses. It was easy to understand assembly language, but now I have to learn embedded C. And it seems a lot complicated without examples. Do you have some ideas? I think the RP2040 has a pretty good C SDK and really good documentation. So I probably, for C level stuff, I would start at the RP2040, I think. Johnny says, my hobbies have always turned to jobs, and I've had to start new hobbies over and over. Yeah. Yeah. Scott says, I see what you're saying. The problem there is tools like place and route are so proprietary that something like that might be impossible. I'm only really interested in the FPGAs that are supported with the open tool chains. And they have openly documented the bit streams for them. So, like the Xilinx 7 series are pretty well documented. Folknology says, partial reconfig of FPGA is difficult. There's been a little experimentation with the OS tools around this. Well, so that's what the Zinc is pretty interesting to me, because the Zinc has hard ARM cores where we can just run CircuitPython. And then those cores can control the FPGA stuff. Oh, there is an FPGA channel. You should be able to just do like the hashtag as well. Oh, yeah. You'll probably come up with some new device in baby rearing. Yeah, maybe. The problem with me making anything to use at home is that then I have to maintain it, and that's the hard part. All right, let's at least get through this example and show it off. I was thinking about doing the keyboard equivalent as well, because I thought it'd be kind of interesting. I guess, and FPGA can be reset to be used again. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I haven't looked at the details of how, like, what the control allows you to do. Okay, so here's how this works. USB core is the PyUSB stuff. USB devices are usually identifiable with this like combination of a vendor ID, VID, and a product ID. So this is for the particular mouse I showed earlier. And there's kind of 2 pieces to, well, yeah, the report. So this is what bit means what mouse button, just to print it out nicely. So, no, Folknology, I think you're on track. Like, I'm thinking, like, imagine you want to be able to basically patch so that your bit stream has like 4 NeoPixel controllers on it, right? So you have a standard NeoPixel peripheral that's been laid out to be in a subset of the cells of the subset of the cells of an FPGA, and you want to just like in CircuitPython just copy and paste those bits to like multiple slots, if that makes sense. I'm imagining like the problem is that the FPGA tools have to run on Linux, right? Basically. So what if you run the hard place and route analysis stuff once and then just use CircuitPython to like patch them together as you need them? But I haven't looked too much into it. Asa says, consider FPGA-based neural net to determine what baby wants and needs. I think that's what learning to be a parent is all about. There are more buttons than those three. There are at least two more. These three are only on this one mouse. So this is just meant to be like a very simple example. And if there's more bits, you could just add stuff here. So here's how PyUSB works. You say, I want to find this device, and you can do it by, that's different and can be done. Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, I'm picturing that you would have like an FPGA like device library that is like, you do GitHub CI to produce the little like bit of gateware, and then it just chunks into like some other standard gateware. Hey, Rich. Okay, so we find the device based on the VID, PID, and then we print out the manufacturer and the product names. So these are strings. This API is kind of neat because it has a way to kind of tell the kernel, like the Linux kernel, like, hey, don't, like, stop using this so I can use it. So we see if the kernel's using it, and if it is, then we detach it. There is this notion of interface number. So this is kind of hard-coded for the device that we're using, but we want interface 0. And then this one has a 4-byte report, so we set up a buffer that we're going to read the report into. And then we're just counting how many reports, because I'm like basically printing like the column names every 15 times. So in a while true loop, we read from the endpoint 81. So if we look back in my history, where I don't know, yeah. So what I did is I used lsusb. Oh, and it's not plugged in. Let me plug the mouse in. So I plugged it in, and so this is the descriptor that we're seeing here. So we can see the device where it's like bus number and is based on what it's plugged into. Here's the VID, PID. These names here are taken from some other database, but then the I manufacturer and product these strings are from the device itself. What's a boot mouse? So a boot mouse is a particular structure. So USB devices try to describe the data that they send you. So at the top level, device descriptor is like, I'm going to do human interface device. And then there's like a sub descriptor that says like exactly what all the bits mean. And there's like a specification for specific like boot mouse and boot keyboard versions of those reports. So we'll talk about this a little bit now, but they're kind of like specific report structures that are used that are like well defined that you could use in like a I want to say bootloader, but like your BIOS, right? So and there's actually this like boot interface subclass is kind of like that you want the boot version. You can see it says like how much power it is, whether it has remote wake up, interface protocol, and then more information about the interface. And there's no report descriptors, I think, because boot interfaces are like described outside of this. And then we can see here that it just has one endpoint. This 81 here is so in is like compared to the host, so it's into the host. And you can see that the max packet size here is 4 bytes. So that's why I'm reading this 81 here, and I'm reading 4 bytes into an array. So I try to read it. If it times out, I just continue. I don't care. I'll just look. And then every 15, I'm printing the title. Like kind of, it's going to show you X, Y, wheel, and buttons. So I'm printing X, Y, wheel, and then ending it with space. And then for every button, I'm checking. So the first byte of the report. So it's 4 bytes in the report. The last 3 are just scaled, like they're signed and unsigned versions of things. Where is it? So I found this page that I was looking at. So you can see the report format. It says button status. So it's 1 bit is whether it's down or not, and then X and Y. And then this mouse has a wheel, so the 4th byte is the movement of the wheel. And then button status is, you can just see it's kind of like left, right, middle, bits 0 through 2. And then of course, if your button has more, if your mouse has more buttons, then it will just use more bits. But I just wanted a simple example here. So what I have here is this, like for every button in this list up here, I check to see if it's high in that first byte. And if it is, I print the name. And this last print just does the end line, count up, and a loop around again. So Pierre says, is it the idea that in the future the USB devices will be enumerated and their capabilities found, and if a mouse is found, then it's used? All in a USB host HID library. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I was kind of like assuming not. So one of the main uses, and I think I talked about this last week, is that Bill Binko wants to use USB host. Bill Binko does AT makers, so accessibility tech. And I got one of these. There's this. This device here, it's called an intellikey, and it's basically like it's kind of like a resistive touchpad. So you can, this is an overlay. So you can like take this and you can flip it to a different one. And the overlays actually have little black markers so that the device can read which overlay has been inserted. And in this case, it's like one specific device that you're trying to talk to. It's a custom HID version. So if you wanted to use this on Windows, for example, you actually need a custom driver to do it. But what Bill's managed to do currently is he uses a trinket with USB host in Arduino to read the device and then spit it out over UART to CircuitPython. And so if we can read it directly in CircuitPython, you can basically do the interpretation of like what pressing this means from their custom protocol that this device speaks to the standard one that like your computer would just automatically work with. Micah says it looks like a kid's educational thing. It's actually, it's just for, it's not necessarily for kids. It's for folks that he was talking about people with Parkinson's who don't have like fine motor skills, so that they're like, they can press down and then press what they need, is what he was talking about. And these are from like the early 2000s, I think. Like these devices have been around forever. So that's kind of why I'm focusing on the like, let's just assume that you know a lot about what you're plugging in like this, and you just need access to it. So that's where I'm starting. But I thought I'd do kind of like, there's kind of like typical versions of like mouse and keyboard and stuff that I figured I'd start with too. Mark says, just want to say hi and wish you all the best for the upcoming weeks. Keep us posted and looking forward to your return. Thanks, Mark. Pierre says, you could even make that thing BLE for connecting to iPads. Yeah. Yep. And that's something I've been thinking about too. So the ESP32S3 can do Bluetooth and it can do USB host, but it only has one copy. Or only has one USB peripheral, so we couldn't do CircuitPy at the same time as doing USB hosts. So there is some maybe future work that we would be able to, like, there is a way to detect whether your USB, so there's this thing OTG on the go, and it has the, like, some things have the ability to decide whether it should be a device or a host. Greg says, I'm also interested in CDC and host mode for using USB serial dongles. Yep. Yeah, so what I'm targeting, I showed this last week, but I'm also targeting the IMX 1060, which this giant board is, but also the Teensy 4. The Teensy 4 is also an IMX, so that's kind of like the first thing we're going to support, and then hopefully we'll also support the RP2040. Neither of those are Bluetooth chips, but yeah. So let me just, FoamyGuy is hanging out. Let me just run this script, and then we'll get FoamyGuy in here in just a bit. I just want to show you what the output is, well, to kind of finish my thought. So that here's I'm running it, and I need to open my Pi environment. So here you can see that it read the manufacturer and the product name, and now if I, like, this is the scroll wheel. If I press the middle mouse button, we can see that there, and then if I move the mouse, we're getting the first two columns, or the first two numbers are the mouse movements. And then if I do the right button, the left button. And so you can imagine that you're using CircuitPython to, like, translate this to other stuff, or things like that. So that's the first thing. I want to do a keyboard, and I actually have a joystick here as well. So I thought maybe I'll do at least a keyboard example, because I think a lot of people want to do keyboards with it as well. But yeah, let me turn the desktop audio on, or yeah, I'll turn the desktop audio on, and we'll see how the video works. Today's deep dive has been a long detour at times. That's what deep dives are all about here. I might need to friend FoamyGuy, I'm not sure. Yeah, Tim, you should friend me on Discord. Oh, I can friend you. I think we have to be friends. Hopefully pop out works. All right, I can hear you. I can see you. Now folks can hear you.
Okay, let me mute.
Okay, and if I pop you out, people can see you. Great.
Okay, perfect. I can hear you through the Discord, and I have the YouTube still pulled up, so I can see you as well through there.
Yeah, sorry my camera doesn't work. I don't know.
No problem.
I don't know why that is. So I let folks know that you're planning on taking this spot, which I'm excited about.
I am as well.
How long have you been streaming electronicsy CircuitPython-y stuff?
Yeah, good question. I just actually looked into that a little while ago, I think a week or two ago, and January, I think 16th or 13th, something like that, last year was my first stream, so okay. Just a little bit over a year.
And how have you liked doing it?
I enjoy it quite a bit. I think, I don't remember exactly when you started, you were a big inspiration for me to stream the kind of content that I'm doing. There's a couple other folks on Twitch that I'll watch that also were inspirational in that. I think it's really awesome, honestly. I've done the majority of my career in development has been either alone or in a very small team. And the stream provides almost like a pair programming experience where other folks are able to kind of help in real time, and it's a really fun experience, I find.
Yeah. So thank you for doing that. I think I started kind of right after the pandemic started. I think like April of 2020, something like that.
Yeah.
Is I think when I started doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
I had done a couple random ones, which is kind of where the deep dive name came from. But that was when I started doing it regularly.
Gotcha.
Michael wants to know why you're in a circular cutout.
I am in a circle because it's set up in my OBS. I have like a mask that cuts off
Right.
the corners of the camera, and then I usually overlay. I have a green screen that goes behind me, and I usually overlay myself on top of like the IDE, but I don't have the green screen set up today, so we get
Right.
the just circle cut out.
Yeah, I've watched your stream before, so I kind of thought that was I thought that was the case that you're using that. You like your setup's more advanced than mine is.
Yeah, I use this. I basically use this same circle thing here for all of my work meetings and stuff now too. So I've been working remote since the start of the pandemic. So definitely doing lots of remote meetings, and this was just kind of how I got it set up. I had trouble initially with getting the video to feed into different software.
Yeah.
And it turned out that this using OBS, and I finally got virtual cam working, and then that's how I can feed it into Teams. So.
Are you on Windows doing that?
I am not. I'm on Linux. I have it's called Pop! OS Linux, but it's based off of Ubuntu, I think,
Right.
mostly. It's this System 76 company.
Right. Yeah. Because I'm on Linux and I kind of assumed that it didn't work. But I've thought about that too. Being able to, like, I could pipe my OBS back to you right now, potentially, or something.
Yeah, it's tricky. It definitely was. I started on Windows, actually. This computer I have now, I got, I want to say maybe like October 2020. So I haven't had, I mean, it's been over a year, but it's been long enough. I'm kind of used to it finally, but I was a Windows user pretty much exclusively up until that, especially for work. This was kind of my first like dive into actually just using Linux for all of my regular development for work.
And like, kind of what's your programming background? Like we talked about
Yes.
mine earlier. I don't know if you heard that.
I went back and watched just a few minutes of the intro. I didn't see everything.
Yeah.
But my background, I learned Java in high school. I would say that's kind of like the first programming that I really did seriously. Before that, I learned QBasic and kind of played around with it a little bit and found it enjoyable enough to want to try it in high school. But high school is when I would say I really got serious. I was able to learn Java there. We had Java classes, and I did that, I think, at least 3 years, maybe 4 years. I don't remember. This is definitely a while ago at this point. And then from there, I graduated high school in 2006, and then Android came out in 2008. And when Android came out, I picked up the first phone and kind of applied all the Java that I had knew to trying to figure out how to make stuff with Android. And then that kind of became my career. I started out just doing a little bit of freelance stuff and eventually ended up at a digital signage company and have spread out from there and started working in web development and backends with Python and Django and all kinds of different stuff. But I will say, while Java is kind of the first like pretty heavy programming languages that I got into,
Right.
I learned Python at my job after I had gotten hired to work on Android stuff, and I took to Python a lot more. I enjoy writing Python a lot more than Java or any other language, really. So CircuitPython, when I found it, was amazing to me because it was a way to take the familiarity with programming. Like, I'm super comfortable writing programs, and it was a way to take that and be able to like actually manipulate stuff in the real world, which is just such a fun tactile experience. If you're used to only writing software that exists on a screen in a computer, to be able to blink lights and speakers and motors and all kinds of stuff really does open up a fascinating new world.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's say hi to Liz, and we should say hi to Katney too. I don't think I looked at said hi to Katney
Yeah,
yet.
definitely. I got the chat pulled up over here. I'm trying not to just stare all off screen the whole time. But yes,
No, you're doing good.
thank you to Liz and Katney, and I see Liz is Pop OS fan, so that's pretty fun. I've enjoyed Pop OS. I'm gonna end up probably eventually getting a desktop. This one's a laptop, but
Oh yeah,
I've enjoyed it enough to want to go at it again, at least give it another try.
nice. Yeah, I tend to use Arch Linux now. I like being a little bit lower level. Rolling release is a favorite of mine as well.
Yeah, I have a buddy who actually was the first person that I did work with when I finally got done, if you'll say, being just a solo developer. The first other person that we hired at my company is big into Arch Linux, and he's like always, kind of resetting everything up from scratch.
Oh yeah.
And keeping everything up to date. I'm a lot more like, I don't know. I don't want to tinker. I want to use the computer to tinker with other things. I don't want to tinker with the computer quite as much. I just want the computer to turn on and do what it needs to do to let me tinker with other stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I was using Mac for a while. Like that's the argument for using a Mac, is that you get like the command line goodness, and Windows is getting a lot better for this. But like on Mac, you get all the regular command liney stuff, but you get that like it just works sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, like, what do you think? What's your theory on why you felt like Python was really easy? Is really easy? Like, what's your theory on that?
It's a good question. I think that Python, it depends a lot on the libraries you're using and the different code that you're working with, but a lot of times it turns out relatively close to English. If you have a person who doesn't know how to program and you read Python code, oftentimes you can kind of tell what it's going to do, or at least have a pretty good educated guess at what it's going to do. Whereas if you take a person who doesn't know programming, or doesn't know C or Java or anything like that, and you show them C or Java, there's so many overwhelming weird characters and different things that aren't going to make sense to them. It's tough for them to try to figure out like what it's actually going to do. I think that is something that Python has that not a lot of other languages do. I think that's one of the things that drew me to it. I mean, honestly, even like simpler stuff like the way string substitutions and stuff like that worked kind of blew my mind, and that was one of my favorite things with Python for a long time. Coming from Java, just always concatenating strings together, being able to substitute in and stuff like that was really awesome. Beyond that, I will say, like, as I've learned more and more about Python, one of the things that keeps me there is like it can do so many different things. Java is very widespread as well, so like there is lots of different types of software you can write with Java, but Python, it feels like, is more widespread. If you want to do web development, there's frameworks for it. I've gotten big into Django web framework as I've gone on, so like that's probably my second forte. I would say like the thing I have the most experience with is Android. The second most is probably Django at this point. But also Micropython and CircuitPython came along and opened up a whole new world as well, which is just not on the table with Java.
Right. It's been pretty wild though. I was like looking at the ARM 11 chip on the original Raspberry Pi Zero has like instructions to accelerate Java.
Oh, wow.
Like it's called like Giselle or something. It's just like there was a world where Java was like had promised to be everywhere.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is in a lot of places, even to this day, or at least the last time I installed JRE, is like the little installer screen will tell you it's on like 8 billion devices or 9 billion devices, and it's in cell phones and ATMs and all kinds of places that you might not expect.
Right.
But it's a lot more hidden away. It's a lot like if you work in the corporate world, you have a better chance of running across Java, maybe.
Yeah, I know when I was at Google, there was a lot of Java there too, but I always worked on the C++ side of things.
Gotcha.
Which was good. Although when I interned, I was doing JavaScript stuff in like Gmail.
Oh, nice.
Interesting too.
Yeah, I picked up JavaScript later. It's kind of become one of the things I've had to learn. So like the company I work for is very small. I was a solo developer for a long time. I was in a pair for quite a while after that. Eventually we grew to a few more, but we ended up splitting off, and I'm back down to a pair now. And so I've had to learn many hats that I didn't necessarily set out to learn just to be able to exist in that environment.
I think that's a really good skill to be able to do, though. I like definitely think I'm there too. Is like just always learning something new and
Yeah,
having
I
a
agree.
broad base.
I tend to always have fun learning new stuff. New stuff is always exciting to work on.
Right.
Doesn't always stay exciting forever, but
Yeah, I'm wondering when I'm gonna hit that wall. Wondering when I'll hit that wall with all this embedded stuff. But we're definitely in a lull right now in terms of like microcontrollers coming out and things. So
yeah.
looking forward to I think I'm kind of expecting there to be a wave of new chips once the chip shortage kind of eases.
Yeah. I eventually I think we'll catch up, and there will be so much new stuff that's just been halfway to the finish line or 3/4 of the way to the finish line that just got put on hold, and eventually it's going to be like a waterfall of all of it just finally getting released.
Yeah, and that's like, it's interesting, but at the same time it's like this is the third time I've written an I2C driver or like the I2C code. It's not always the most fun thing to do.
Yeah, re-implement the same stuff on the new devices when they come out.
Right. Yeah. Which is kind of like one thing I would kind of like to do with the FPGA stuff is and the open silicon world is kind of looking for like open cores or like standard cores for things like that. And so I think it would be kind of neat to be able to say like, all right, here's the one I2C logic that we want to support, and we can test it on this thing and we can provide it, and here's the driver for it, and that's just like the one that we think is the one people should use.
Yeah. Standards are definitely nice, and if they can get adopted wide enough, then there can be like just a bunch of reuse, which is always really nice.
I think in the existing micros that we're using today, like I think there's a lot of reuse. They just don't tell us. Right?
Yeah.
Like there's already providers for IP like that, but they don't necessarily tell you like, oh yeah, we're using the I thought that was cool just in the like some of the RP2040 docs. They're like, yeah, like this is the standard ARM IP for UART or something. It's like, okay, great. That makes it a lot simpler.
Yeah. It's been fascinating to see Raspberry Pi bring the RP2040. It's great to see them kind of attack another sort of form factor and market and really push the whole industry forward, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So James, well, Maiko had a question for you in the YouTube. Just are you in the US or no?
I am in the U.S. Yeah, I'm in the Midwest portion of the U.S. in a city called Kansas City is where I'm at.
Nice.
Which has Google Fiber.
Do you have Google Fiber?
I do. Yep, that was one of the things when I moved. It's been almost a little over 2 years, I think, since we've been in this house. That was one of the things we looked for, though, when we moved was a Google Fiber place, and the place we lived at before actually had it as well.
Yeah, but I think it's one of those things that you don't move away from having fiber internet.
It would have been quite a tough sell to find a place that it didn't have access to that or something comparable.
Right.
Definitely. Once you get used to it, it's really tough. Like there was a while where, but before the world went crazy and I was still going to work every day, there was a while where it was like fiber internet at home and like, Time Warner business class something, which it's not terrible at work, but it was like nowhere near the fiber. And yeah, you start waiting on a big download and you're just sitting there thinking like, this would be done already and I could move on.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. James says, it seems like Damien really changed the game with MicroPython. I think that's fair to say. I think, and it's interesting, there are actually like Python versions for microcontrollers before MicroPython as well. But they never quite worked like MicroPython, I think, is kind of what I've gathered. And And Micropython in particular, I think also did a really good. I think the timing was right. They had the marketing because they did Kickstarters to start with, and then Damien was very thorough in like implementing Python 3.4, and he did a really good job testing it and stuff too. So, yeah, I think MicroPython's amazing, and it's been such a good foundation for us to build CircuitPython on top of as well.
Yeah, definitely. Microbit was the first one, the original BBC Microbit. That was the first experience I had with Python on a microcontroller. And
I was just going to ask you this.
It sold me, right? It did not take long at all for me to be sold on the idea of Python on microcontrollers.
So how did you come across it?
Let's see.
Were you like, I had this microbit, what do I do with it?
Yeah, I picked up a couple of them just because they looked like a neat thing, and I recognized some of the languages that it worked with, and I just started playing with it from there. Eventually, I teach web development. Like I teach really low level stuff, introduction like to JavaScript, introduction to HTML and CSS and stuff like that. And one of the things I did was I bought a stack of microbits and would hand them out to the JavaScript students, because you can actually use I don't know if it's MakeCode or Microsoft something. There's a way you can write JavaScript for them as well. And it switches back and forth between JavaScript and Blockly.
Right.
So I found that to be really helpful for folks, being able to teach them the fundamentals of JavaScript in a way that's more interesting than like console output in the browser.
Right.
So that was one of the first things that I started doing with it once I found that. And then somewhere along the way, I don't know exactly how I found the Circuit Playground Express, but that was really kind of the next thing that I latched onto, was Circuit Playground Express. And then from there, I pretty much dove all the way in. The next major step, I guess, after the Circuit Playground Express, the next thing that got me in a little bit deeper was discovering Display.io on the Edge badge, which actually, that brings me to I guess a small story of we have met once at Hackaday SuperCon in 2018 or 2019. So my wife works for Hackaday, and she was the one that introduced you for your talk. So we said hi when we were there, but that's about all the more conversation we had. But the Edge badge that they gave out at that conference, that was my first CircuitPython device with a display on it. And I kind of spent the weekend there, and then the next like week or two after I got back, working on a tile map game. And then that like really was the thing that kind of like cemented the idea that I really wanted to get involved with this project and the community, and everything else was working on that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. It's so funny. I had somebody ping me on the embedded Slack like yesterday that was like, hey, are you going to Open Hardware Summit? I really enjoyed your talk last year. And I was like, did I give a talk at Open Hardware Summit last year? And I like pulled it up, and like, sure enough, I was like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember doing that. So it's been really wild for me just how long I've been doing this now. Like I was at Google almost 6 full years. I like left a month before it would have been 6. And like I'm 6 years with Adafruit in like August of this year or something. And I've been doing CircuitPython the whole time. So it's been pretty wild just how far we've come. And I feel, I meet a lot of people at conferences. So I'm like, I do like conferences. I would love to meet you again. And if you're ever in Seattle, of course, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a place that I've always wanted to get up to. Both my wife and I honestly want to come up there and see some of the stuff along the coast and hang out. So I will reach out once we do make it out that way.
Yeah, and I should say, like, if anybody's watching that's deep dive, like, let me know if you're in town and we can meet up somewhere. Like that goes for basically everybody in the CircuitPython community. Teshipu says, I always find myself being thanked by random people I meet for things I don't remember doing because I did them on the side apropos something else. Yeah. It's good. You put lots of good karma out into the world. I thought I meant to go look at your CircuitPython 22, but I forgot. But I wanted to pick your brain about kind of what is interesting to you for CircuitPython and kind of what are the things that we should be thinking about in your
Um,
opinion?
so I have been definitely drawn to display IO more than a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's partially because I've done so much programming on a computer, on a screen. Display
Mm-hmm.
IO feels familiar to me because it's basically just a little computer and a little screen. Feels a lot like working on Android a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been one of the things that I tend to be drawn to. Like if I don't necessarily aim in any particular direction, I end up going in that direction more often than
Right.
not.
Right.
I will say I'm trying to remember actually what all I put in my 2022 post this year. I think the main like sort of wish that I had that I put in there was about Secrets.py and
Yeah.
about trying to move on from using Secrets.py.
Right.
I think secrets.json is a good way to go. I noticed that Whippersnapper uses secrets.json, so
Mm-hmm.
I was happy when I saw that. I think that starts a precedent for us to be able to maybe switch over.
Right.
We don't necessarily generally tell folks to put logic in secrets.py anyway, so
Right.
it's more or less just a data file. It might as well be JSON.
Yeah.
Um,
JSON doesn't
but
have comments though. That's why I'm like, JSON.
that's definitely a really good point and perhaps the most aggravating thing about JSON. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely true. I
That's
was
the thing.
looking at JSON the other day where they just put in a bogus field. They had like a bogus field and put like dashes or something in it to
Right.
to
You
make
just
it seem like a comment.
you have a comment field or something.
Yeah,
Let's call
something
it
like that.
comment. I mean, the nice thing is then you can round trip it, which is nice.
Yeah.
But that's why I find myself going towards Toml because Toml has comments.
Yep, that would be nice. Or if we had a way to, from an integration standpoint, I think it would be nice if we had a way to mock like environment variables. I don't know what
Yeah.
it could read from anywhere, I guess. But if we had that, I think it will make the code, it can make the code be pretty similar between
Right.
different platforms. Lots of stuff uses environment variables for tokens and
Right. Yeah, there was
that sort of
something I
thing.
was just thinking of. Another reason I was thinking about environment variables being really helpful for that. And I can't remember. Oh, Christian points out there's a JSON C that allows comments.
Oh, really? JSON C.
Yeah.
I have to check into that.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so display IO, I'm really happy that you and some other folks have come along and kind of taken it under its wing. It was kind of this like big giant thing that I had done based on like the Python GTK stuff I had done ages ago. And it was like I wanted it to be more structured. I wanted it to manage dirty rectangles and stuff for you. But like I got so tired of it by the time like I finished it. It was just kind of like, okay, I got to do something else. And like Carter
Yeah.
came along and did the learn guide, which was really helpful. And then you and like K Match have been like doing a really good job at like, and Mark as well. Like I start to like it took me a while to get it, but now I get it, and now I understand that I can like build these widgets and the layout stuff that you've been doing, and like, so I'm excited to see it go.
Yeah, I think there's a lot like the core display IO leaves a lot of functionality and flexibility. So I definitely commend you and whoever else worked on it originally because there is a lot of stuff that is possible to build on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have some of it is already out there and we're making more and more every day. But I think there's lots of really neat widgets that we can build and people can eventually use.
Right, right, and I think in a large part the widget idea was like part of what informed it. Like, no, we're actually gonna have this like object-oriented notion of what's on the screen, rather than just doing like the frame buffer style. Like, we're just gonna push pixels.
Yeah, yeah, and it draws me towards it because I find it similar in nature to the way that Android interfaces
Right.
work. They're laid out differently. There's like an XML language that you can write it with, but
Right.
once you get into the Java code, they're more or less treated like objects, just like the display IO groups and tile grids and stuff.
Right. Right. And I kind of knew that, and that was kind of the thing that I was like pushing the people that are like, I just want to write pixels. It's like, well, most of the world doesn't just write pixels. Most of it's all structured around widgets and interactions and stuff like that. So
Yep. Yeah, Pixels is the lowest level.
yeah,
Everything is built, and we're dozens of layers above it on most modern graphic stuff. So
yeah.
it's fascinating to me. It's fun to be like on the ground layer trying to build through those layers that I have experience using. So that's been definitely a real fun thing for me to get involved in.
Yeah. So do you think the future of display I/O for you is largely widgets and stuff, or where do you live in that world?
Um, I mean, I like to play with all kinds of different stuff. Widgets are one of the things where I think there's lots of opportunities for us to create widgets that help folks.
Hmm.
So that's one place that I've spent a lot of time. But I mean, in terms of like projects and stuff, like the tile map game stuff that I got into is all based heavily on the way that tile grids work internally in Display.io.
Right.
So that's probably one of the things that I've had a lot of fun building as far as like actual projects with it.
Hmm.
Um, Beyond that, I think like I would love to see a world where there is and Kamach and I have talked about this as well, actually, and I know he's working on some different stuff to move us in this direction. I would love to see a world where one day there is a tablet like device, maybe a 5-inch
Hmm.
tablet, 7-inch tablet, or something like that,
Right.
with a really nice screen on it, and we can actually start making like interactive tablet applications.
Right.
The PyPortals have capability to do some of that kind of stuff now, but I would love to see a fully fleshed out CircuitPython tablet. I don't know if that's an Adafruit device or if that's somebody who comes along and builds their own device and happens to put CircuitPython
Right.
on it.
Right.
But
So what
I
do
would
you?
love to see that come along.
So I think the challenge is like, at and I'm sure I get accused of this. Like, at what point do you think you're reinventing the wheel? Right. Like how do we build a CircuitPython tablet, and how does it differentiate from an Android tablet or an iPad? Right. Like what is the appeal? What is the pitch for that?
Yeah,
In your mind?
it's definitely a good question, and I think it's tough for me because I think the appeal to me is to tinker with it, is to be able to write this new type of programming language and be on the cutting edge and build all these widgets that can make applications with it. I will say
Right.
from marketing standpoint or consumer standpoint, it's tough because Android does a lot out of the box, right? Wi-Fi connectivity and
Yep.
Wi-Fi calling and all of this kind of stuff, and maps and browsers and stuff.
Right.
Everyone kind of is going to expect stuff like that. So my thought would be, I think gaming is one of the larger opportunities where like we have the ability to make some really, really cool games. There obviously are lots of games out there in the mobile space as well. In fact, it's like super crowded in the mobile game space. So
Hmm.
it's maybe a tough thing to get into, but I could see that being one of the primary selling points. Beyond that, I think it is similar to like a Raspberry Pi in a way where you are not necessarily selling it to an end user who just wants a tablet. You're selling it to an end user who wants to learn how to write programs for tablets.
Right.
Um,
I think
because
that.
it's definitely going to be a lot easier to do with CircuitPython than like really diving into Android or iOS.
Right. Right. Yeah. Distribu says games are hard, and
Games are very hard
yeah.
and a grueling, like if you're not ready to play the same broken, you know, 10 seconds or 20 seconds of a game over and over again, it's a
Right.
tough type of software to make. But
I definitely think that there's a lot of potential in CircuitPython and Display.io specifically for games that are portable, like across a lot of this like maker class of hardware.
agreed.
Like I have one of the play dates, right? The yellow sharp display things, and like it's an STM, and they're making this like whole closed ecosystem that's going to be really awesome, I'm sure. But like imagine a world where you could take a game from that to a Raspberry Pi on your TV, and like I think there's we don't have I don't have, and Adafruit doesn't have the like gaming chops to build that ecosystem for folks, but like there's so much promise I think in making things portable like that. I think it's something that a lot of my projects I cycle around, and maybe it won't be me that cycles around to it, but I think that like as a community we'll cycle back to it.
Yeah,
And like
definitely. Like the oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the Pimoroni, like 32-bit and the Pico system are like definitely in that vein as well.
Yeah, totally agree. I got a Pico system recently. That's been a fun one.
Oh,
A fun
nice.
one to play with as well. Yeah, stuff like that, like the Pi Gamer, the Pi Badges, those little sort of Game Boy like handhelds. I think there's um, that. I think is one of the things that can bring people into the CircuitPython world. I think if we get enough games that run on those types of devices, and just like you were saying, if they're written in such a way where they can move around, it can run on a Pi Gamer or an Edge Badge or a Pimoroni or Deshipu's Pew Pew.
Right.
Then no matter which one of those folks have, they can always kind of play the same game.
Yeah.
And I think that's one way where we can kind of attract people into this world.
Yeah. And like with the Game Boy stuff I did, I actually ported Display IO to the Game Boy as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Nice.
like where like because the display engine of the Game Boy has like sprites. Like
Okay.
I had it set up so that when you created a tile grid, like it wasn't display IO, it was like the higher level layers, but it was re-implemented on top of like the Game Boy. So you would be able to say tile grid and then it's this size, and moving it around would do the like move commands into the Game Boy. So like when I did the like Celeste tile game, like I could run it in display IO, but I could also run it on the Game Boy Color.
That is awesome. Yeah, that I've never gotten to the point of being able to run anything custom on a Game Boy, but I do like that. It seems like such a cool thing to be able to do for sure.
Yeah, well, I need to revisit that cartridge. Like I think that I had reliability issues talking to the Game Boy. So the way that I had it working is the cartridge was a fake cartridge that was just like generating assembly instructions for the CPU to run as needed. But I think the SAMD51 I was using had timing issues to the Game Boy, and if you got the timing wrong, you'd crash the Game Boy.
Ah,
So I think the PIO and the RP2040, or even like an FPGA, like a small FPGA, is probably what we would need to be more reliable with it.
yeah. I heard. I think you mentioned that a couple of times about RP2040 maybe being a good candidate for it.
Yeah, I mean PIO is just so awesome. When you need to
Yeah.
do timing critical stuff, it's so flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, David points out now I have a side project to revisit. I don't know, the Zinc dev board is staring me in the face right now. That might be the thing that I.
Is that a Zinc deadboard? Is that an FPGA one? I'm not
It's
familiar with that one.
yeah, so it's both. It's dual core ARM 9s and FPGA kind of like hybridized together.
Oh,
So you
interesting.
can so that in theory I could run, and I mentioned this to Lamore, and she said don't do that. So it's definitely not Adafruit time, but there's two Cortex A9s, and then there's hard USB IP as well. So I could run CircuitPython on existing circuitry, and then it could talk to the like FPGA management stuff, kind of like dynamically. So it's yeah, it's just another Cortex A series that I think would be fun to support. And then I'd probably get the FPGA stuff working and then lose interest and move on.
Yeah.
But it could be neat. Yeah. I have the Zybo from Digilent is the one that George Hanslab is asking me. But I like the idea, like for getting into FPGAs is something that I think Adafruit will do at some point, and it's a question of like how do you introduce people to them and make it easy and things.
Yeah. Which is it's a tough question. And it does like so far CircuitPython has done I think such a great job of making things that are actually extraordinarily complex easy enough for
Right.
beginners.
Right.
It's a tough challenge for sure.
A lot of my theory I have in terms of getting FPGAs in the hands of people is actually not not requiring them to run all the toolchain stuff. So basically, like having Python libraries that ship with bin files, right? So you say, I want to install this library on the Zinc, or even there's I2C configurable FPGAs. Just say, I download this Python library onto my device, and then it loads the bit stream onto the device, and then you use it, right? So it's like you get the flexibility of it still, but you don't have to do the actual like lay everything out and place and route and stuff like that. Which people will probably argue, they're like, oh, that's not teaching FPGAs, but it's like, yeah, but you're using FPGAs.
Yeah, I'm firmly on the side of being able to use things, probably even to a fault in some people's mind. I'm big on, like, if I can use it to do something interesting, then I'm totally okay with not understanding it,
Right.
like 100% fully.
I think that's a good engineering mindset.
Yeah, I generally am like a race to the highest level I can get to, which
Yeah.
is where, like, diving into the C in the CircuitPython core has been a brand new experience for me to work that low level. I'm generally always trying to build way up on top of stuff.
Interesting. See, that was like my mentality when I was in college, and then at some point I like the simplicity and the machinery of working at the low levels of a micro, and with hardware. Like I like that simplicity. Hamzad says you folks should do ML and introduce people to it. So, yeah, what's your take on ML?
I have not dabbled in it too much. I'm aware kind of what it is and some of the stuff that goes on in the space. I will say that, I mean, the Edge badge, which again, that was that first like display device I got. It's basically a Pi badge with a extra little speaker, and it, I don't know the name of the thing. Is there an ML product with Edge in the name? But I know it's like pretty heavily targeted towards
Yeah.
that type of
What is
stuff.
that? The Google thing. I mean, there's Edge Impulse,
Edge Impulse. Okay.
and then
I
I
I
forget what the
think
Google product is.
it's I don't know that there's much you can do in Circuit Python these days, but I think there's Arduino stuff you can do. I do think eventually it would be cool um, to try to give folks a simplified access to it. I think it might be interesting if we could do stuff in Circuit Python, like pick up a yes or a no from a microphone. I think Arduino code can do that today on the Edge badge.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if we had a similar layer in Circuit Python that allowed us to do like relatively simple stuff like that.
I've just yeah. So my take on the ML thing is just like, I've never seen it be that useful. At least at the like processing levels that we're working at. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
yeah.
it's definitely very its actual usages are, I think, are definitely relatively niche,
Right.
and it does get thrown around a lot as like a buzzword, be all end all next great thing, and a lot of folks kind of just hear it and associate it with cool stuff, but don't necessarily have an idea of what specifically they want to do with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of been some of my feelings about it too. It's just like it's a lot of hype, not a lot of things. Dustin says, "Are you thinking of Coral?" I think I'm just thinking of TinyML. Is that what it's called? There's some Google software project. The Coral board is interesting because people have been asking for. It's really interesting because Blinka provides the CircuitPython layer to all the single board computers. It's been really interesting for me to see just like, I bought this $200 NVIDIA SBC, and now I'm trying to use like Blinka because this is the thing I want to accomplish
Yeah.
on this. And it's just like, it's super interesting. I mean, it's what we do really well, and you've been a huge help with that. It's just like getting people bootstrapped with drivers and things.
Yeah. Is it TensorFlow? Is that the Google one?
TensorFlow.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
that's
I know
right.
that's one of the main things they say on like the Edge badge product page and all that.
Yeah, and there's like TensorFlow Lite and TensorFlow something else even like smaller as well. I
Oh
don't
wow.
know. I've never really done it.
Yeah, I only dabbled enough to get the the sample running once, which was it was like the yes no sample.
Yeah.
It I started heading down that path actually because one of the things that my company did during the pandemic was like temperature check kiosks. Because we do digital signage, and so it was like it kind of fit where we were at in the world.
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to do early on was minimize touches. Like it has a touchscreen on it, and some people have to touch the screen to answer yes no questions.
Right.
I really liked the example that's on the Edge badge that lets you pick up a yes or a no from the microphone. I think something like that would be super beneficial to making basic interfaces with users that aren't based on a touchscreen.
Right. Interesting. So I don't want you to have to divulge too much stuff, but I'm curious what like processors and chips that you see in digital signage, because I think like Raspberry Pis are kind of what I think of.
Yeah. A lot of definitely Raspberry Pi has been a pretty big disrupting force in that market. Like before Raspberry Pis came along, it was like super easy to find computer manufacturers that were selling these little purpose-made computers for digital signage, and it's really hard for them to compete with Raspberry Pi. Like Raspberry Pi comes with a board by itself, so there's no box and there's no power supply, and there's room for people to add stuff onto it, but it's really tough to beat the price and the power that's in a Raspberry Pi. So most of what I work on, though, is Android, like almost like set-top box type devices. They call them media players. So it's not a traditional Android like cell phone or anything like that. It's just a black metal box, and it has a mounting system, so you can bolt it up on the wall or behind the screen or whatever.
Right.
And most of them are like they're the similar chips that are in the phone. So it's like ARM Cortex A4 or something. I don't know the exact numbers or anything like that, but it's mostly the same sort of like middle of the road chips that you find in the cell phone market.
Right. Yeah. I'm very curious about that, because I'm just like, I'm always looking for new things to put CircuitPython on. Surprise. And I think that there's a world of Cortex A level stuff because of Android phones that is potentially gets you some really cool like peripherals and stuff, like HDMI output, for example.
Yeah, and they're quite powerful for what they are.
And they can be cheap. That's the other thing that I'd love to find is like I was looking at the chip that Limor had posted about for the Linux Feather. It's like 64 megs of RAM. It runs at like 600 or 700 megahertz, and it's like, I think she can get that for like $2, whereas like the IMX RTs, the 1060s are like that price or more expensive, but they're very similar in that they're like, well, they have a less RAM, but they have similar CPU speeds and stuff too. So I think it's for the high end of things, like the A series stuff might actually be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited by the idea of CircuitPython continuing to make its way to more and more powerful platforms. Like the HDMI stuff that you're working on is really exciting to me, especially because like a huge component of digital signage is just the player mounts up behind the screen and plugs in, and it's just showing whatever. So I have over the years we've actually used CircuitPython on a couple of different projects that I worked on for work for like custom fancier installations where we did like lighting effects and trigger effects where somebody would like pick up a product and it would change the TV to show stuff that's relevant to that product. That's actually in fact, that might be where I got the first Circuit Playground Express from, because we did one project where we bought like 150 trinkets or something like that, and we made this custom little board that they plugged into, and then it had some 3.5 millimeter jacks that went to these pedestal plugs that are it's for cell phone stores, like a Sprint store essentially is where it's at. I'm in Kansas City. Sprint's headquartered in Kansas City. You can guess we probably did some work when they were around and not T-Mobile.
Right.
But I think what happened actually is, which I think they still do today, like if you order enough stuff from Adafruit. They send you the Circuit Playground Express.
Yeah, just as the freebie.
Tossed in, yeah, and I think that might be where I got the first
That's awesome.
CPX that I played with from.
I know that those are one of the boards that end up as freebies a lot, which is cool.
Yeah, it's a great one to give to somebody because you can do so many different things with it. It's such a world that you can introduce them to.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's interesting to see what devices we have as like our flagship devices. It's changed a little bit with AdaBox and really having flagships like 4 times a year. Yeah, Circuit Playground Express in particular was, yeah, that was a good time. Like figuring out the Express moniker and putting the spy flash, and yeah, pretty wild.
Yeah, looks like Bruce uses Raspberry Pis and signage as well. And Blitz City is doing some crawling around in ceilings. I'll definitely attest to crawling around in ceilings is not very fun and very hot and very dusty.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun to me. Screenly, digital signage made easy.
Yep, I think that's a Raspberry Pi one. Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead if you were gonna keep.
I was just gonna say I ended up building a digital signage platform that we use. So we have seen a couple of those ones that have come out over the years for Raspberry Pi. But the main thing now is like we actually built our own in-house signage platform that lets you manage all these devices remotely. It's a similar type of thing as Screenly.
Right. Neat. So, I was going to pick your brain. I want to ask you about what folks can expect from your stream, but maybe that will be the last thing that I ask you.
Yeah, good question.
Or you could just...
Go ahead.
I forgot what the other thing I was going to ask you about. So, yeah, let's talk about your stream.
Okay. Yeah, I will say, folks, I've been streaming on Saturdays for a little while now, a little bit over a year. So if folks want to, they can catch all the old ones are on YouTube. I think they disappear off of Twitch after a few weeks or whatever is the default, right. But they're all on YouTube. You can check those out. It will probably end up being fairly similar to that. In terms of the type of content, it's pretty similar to Deep Dive because I was pretty heavily inspired by Deep Dive. So I'm just working on coding and testing and doing different stuff. The actual like nuts and bolts of what I will be working on, probably a little bit higher level because I'm not to the point where I'm like introducing brand new ports into the core or anything like that. So it's likely that we'll spend more time in Python land, definitely looking at lots of display IO stuff. But I will say I'm especially lately, I've been kind of keeping my eye on the issues list in the core to try to find things that I think are within my ability to actually work on and complete. So there will be some work in the core as well when I get into it.
Mm-hmm. So Hams Labs is asking, are you going to keep doing your Saturday streams as well?
That's a good question. I'm definitely, for the short term, yes. That's the plan. It may change at some point. I'll have to see like how it goes after a couple of weeks of doing Friday evening and then Saturday morning. So yeah, for folks that don't know, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Central Time, which is different usually, like Deep Dive is a Pacific time show currently, but 10 a.m. Central Time on Saturday mornings is when I stream. And so I'll probably kind of play it by ear a little bit after a couple of weeks if I'm
That's a lot of streaming.
Yeah, it is. If I'm not feeling like jumping on right in the morning on Saturdays, I don't know, it may bump to Sundays, it may bump to later in the day on Saturdays. I'll probably end up doing less time overall on Saturdays. I actually tend to run a little bit longer than Deep Dive. Right. I go generally about 3 hours and then I start getting pretty antsy and head out pretty shortly after that. But it will probably cut down the amount of time that I'm going. I probably won't be doing the longer ones nearly as much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff. I think one of the specific things I want to get into pretty soon is like async IO. I haven't had a chance to play too much with async IO, but I want to specifically look at it as it relates to display IO. No surprise there probably, but maybe like hooking up buttons and other types of display IO outputs that can do things, sort of on their own while other stuff is happening. So that's one place that will play fairly soon into the future.
Nice. Do you know what time you start in UTC?
I do not. I do not.
Yeah, well, I'm 8 hours different, and you're 6 hours different.
Yeah, ours does change too. Like half of the year we are 6 hours off, and then half of the year we're 5 hours off. So
yeah, same with us.
For at least what Google says right now is that 10 a.m. Central is 4 p.m. UTC. So I think that's probably right, but I just did a quick.
Yeah. So Johnny recommended propose a not deep overview of display I/O and moving deeper from there. I think you're a good person for that.
Yeah, I think so definitely as well. I've been excited actually for folks that watch JP's content. JP John Park with Adafruit puts out all sorts of great content, including I think CircuitPython Parsec is one of the formats that I think is really, really nice for folks to be able to get a quick and dirty look at something and learn the basics of it.
Right.
The last couple of CircuitPython Parsecs have been centered around display I/O, so I've been super excited to see that. I definitely think there's a lot of opportunity for entry-level content. So that is one of the things that I want to start working on this year as well, is lots of like getting started with display I/O content, both using it and getting started like building your own widgets and stuff. So
yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, and you're doing part-time with Adafruit now too, so you have some dedicated hours for that.
Yep. Mondays. Yeah, for folks that don't know, I work on CircuitPython on Mondays, all day Mondays.
Yeah.
And then just in the evenings and stuff the other days, but Mondays during the daytime.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
I have been actually hopping on Twitch on Mondays as well. It's definitely a less structured thing. Like when I get on Saturdays, I do an introduction, I keep the chat on the screen, and I do all of that stuff more like deep dive. But on Mondays and some other evenings, I'll hop on as well and just kind of dive straight in and start working. I find it's good for, depending on my mood, but certain moods that I get in, like it's good for focus. It gives me a reason to like sit down and go and keep going. So
interesting, because I'm definitely not as focused when I'm streaming as I am when I'm not streaming.
It's a fine line. You can definitely let yourself be distracted in the chat. Especially this format where you have the chat and you're open to questions all the time.
Yeah.
That's probably not as conducive. But like these, when I'm on Monday or when I'm on in the evenings, I'm not paying quite as much attention to the chat, and I'm also not doing the whole introduction and all of that. I kind of just like dive straight in, and you can watch over my shoulder.
Right.
Folks do still chat with me sometimes, and especially it's helpful. Like folks will help with the code I'm working on. That's one of the coolest things I think about streaming is like, it's an extra person to watch over what you're doing and tell you when you messed up before you try to run it.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn, and we have a really good community too. So that's really neat. So Bruce S says, we want to know how CircuitPython core is moving to Rust.
I can't help you too much there. I know what Rust is, and there are a couple streamers that have started streaming Rust that I occasionally watch, but like I've never touched it myself.
Yeah, I like the theory of it too, but I've never actually used it. I've stolen a lot of their community organizing stuff, but never actually written Rust. But I like it in theory, and I've always just challenged the people that say like I want Rust in the CircuitPython core to actually hook it up. Like, okay, implement like common HAL bus IO SPI in Rust and get it hooked into the build system, and then we start from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about stuff, honestly. Like, there's lots of folks who, I'll say there's lots of folks who will say they want things, or there's lots of folks that believe they want things, but not necessarily enough to like put in the work to do it. One of the things I will say, I think it's really admirable that you're willing to like spend time to get folks spun up on stuff. Like if there is someone out there who wants that bad enough and wants to put the time into it, I have no doubt they can start it, and I have no doubt that you will help point them in the right direction. It's going to be difficult for them to do. They're going to have a lot of hard work, but like the invitation is there, and I think that's a really neat thing about the project.
Yeah, I mean it's always been really important to me, and it's important to me that we're not gatekeeping people out of the project, even though a lot of us are paid by Adafruit to work on it. Like I have this vision that the project becomes bigger than Adafruit, right? Like I'd love to see other companies paying people to work on it. And that's part of it is like I just don't want, like, even though it's an Adafruit project, I want it to be bigger than that. So and then it's of course selfish. Like we have awesome people that are doing awesome contributions, and we're not, like, Adafruit's not paying them for that. So it's important to me that, and I've like apologized one time, and I think the folks I was talking to, I think it was Mark. It was just like, dude, I don't mind. Like I'm happy to do this because I'm getting benefit from it too, and so I want to make sure that people that are getting benefit from it are empowered to make it what they need as well. So yeah, I spend a lot of time doing email, but it's important. The last thing, we're just about out of time, and I hope you were planning on doing an hour because you're going to end up doing an hour.
Works for me.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, because you have a lot of Android background, the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about is the Beely workflow and the things that we can do to complement it on the app side. Do you have ideas about that?
Yeah, I think that I don't have an iOS device yet. I've actually been meaning to pick up a used iPhone specifically so that I can use the newer PyLeap and the other one, which is the name of it, I'm forgetting, but the glider and the demo one.
Right.
And so I know some of that stuff is out there on iOS, and the app that Trevor has been working on looks super awesome to me. Being able to download the examples and run them on the device, I think that is like really, really amazing stuff that helps out a lot. One of the first things I did when I kind of started getting involved with CircuitPython was make an Android CircuitPython IDE. This worked over USB, and it was nowhere near fully featured, but it was good enough to like plug in your device. You need some weird connectors and stuff if you want to do it into an Android phone, but if you get it plugged in, you could see the CodePy and you could, change the name of it or, quick change the code to make it do something else. One of the big benefits I think there is from being able to program the devices with a phone is being able to show them off. So I think it actually helps the community grow because you can carry your CircuitPython device. You already have your phone with you.
Right.
If you get to talking with a person who's not familiar with anything about the project, you can quickly show them a demo, on a Circuit Playground Express or Bluefruit or whatever, something like that. And then you can quickly just be like, okay, now you've seen this demo. Let me just, pop here, scroll through this list, and we're going to pull up this other demo and run it and show them like, within seconds, the idea of switching over to an entirely different program.
Right.
I think that's a hugely beneficial thing. So one of the specific things I would like to work on is trying to bring that same ability that now exists on iOS over to Android.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that would be really neat.
I would say I would say the stuff that Trevor has done that I've seen in the videos looks amazing to me. I don't have any particular ideas on really improving it off the top of my head, but I also haven't had a chance to play with it with my own hands.
Right. The other thing I've been thinking a lot about is the actual editing experience of editing Python. Right, and especially because type annotations have really taken off across all the libraries, thanks in large part to TechTrick. Like, I think that, and I don't know if your existing Android editor took that into account, but thinking about like that sort of more assisted editing on a touchscreen is really interesting and something that not a lot of people have thought about.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think we talked about that on a weekly meeting at some point, and you brought up that idea, and it really opened my eyes to the thought, because that is 100% true. Like cell phones don't make good IDEs because typing on a touchscreen is not fun. It's hard and it's slow and all of that stuff. So anything that the IDE can do to try to guess what you are going to type and give you a big old easy to press button to do it, I think is definitely going to make the experience a lot better. And the types, I believe I'm of the same mind as you. I think that will help us in the long term be able to make a much nicer experience for folks working on phones.
Right. Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll keep brainstorming on that. And I think that the Beely workflow stuff is going to be a long-term sort of thing, right? It's going to be it's gonna be a slog. It's gonna take because you need the app side of it. It's not as easy as USB. You plug it in and it acts like this thing that you've been using forever, right? It's gonna be a bit of a slog, but it's cool. I think we're gonna be really innovative and creative in that world. It's just gonna take some time.
Yeah. With the newest stuff that's out there, I think I haven't seen anything quite like. Is it PyLeap and Glider? The one that I can't remember the specific name of the one that does the demos that Trevor has been working on. There's one that's PyLeap. More like, is it PyLeap? Okay.
Yeah, that's what Trevor's working on. Yeah.
I haven't seen anything else out there like that. I definitely think that is one of the coolest things I've seen come out. That brings together the world of mobile phones and microcontrollers, which definitely I sit at the intersection of.
Yes, you do. You have a lot of you have a lot of complementary skills to myself as well. Which is really helpful. So it's been awesome. Thank you for taking my spot as I'm out, and thanks for dropping by and chatting with me. Do you have anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, thank you for having me on. Thank you to all the folks that are watching and have watched me on Saturdays. And yeah, I look forward to hanging out with you all on Fridays.
Right. So will you be streaming tomorrow morning if folks want to get a preview?
Yep, I will be. Yep, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, which is about 16 hours from right now, if my math is right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so folks will find your Saturday and your random Hacker Time streams on your own stream, right? And then you'll take this slot on the Adafruit stream.
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome. All right, so why don't you drop a link? WebBSK is asking, what's your handle on Twitch?
Yeah, good question. Twitch, it's FoamyGuy_Twitch. I'll put a link to it as well. Some Minecraft player or something got FoamyGuy years ago before I ever got on the Twitch game.
So why don't you drop your links in the live broadcast chat, and you should actually be able to put them in YouTube as well if you just want to try switching to the Adafruit account to do that too.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody gets the links.
Yeah, I will definitely drop those in. And here's this one. And I'll put the YouTube as well. The YouTube, again, is better because it keeps the videos. I think they disappear out of Twitch.
Yeah, I think
before too long. I don't know if it was on my end. I think I just heard a jingle. If somebody just followed me on Twitch, thank you.
Probably.
It feeds through OBS, which happens to be open to hook up my camera here, and so it makes the jingle, and I can hear it going off. It would display a thing on the screen as well, but the stream is not actually running.
Right. Cool. Well, I'm gonna try to make your Friday streams before I actually go on leave.
Nice.
So I'll try to be in the chat for that. I see you occasionally on Saturdays, and I try not to do work on Saturdays. So I'm excited to be able to watch you in the slot on Fridays before I turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah, nice. Happy to have you pop into the chat for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. And folks are following you on Twitch. So have a great weekend, and I'll say goodbye after I say goodbye to you.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks. I'll see you.
Thanks, FoamyGuy.
Yep.
All right. So I thought I have to do cats too, but thank you all. It's been wonderful to have you hanging out, and thanks again to FoamyGuy for joining the stream and chatting. It's been great to catch up, and I wish I knew when I meet people in person that who they are and what member of the community they're going to be. But that's what relationships are about, right? Is building them up over time. So excited to see you all. And I'll be around on Discord. If you want to, let me pull up my wrap up so I don't forget anything. If you want to join the Discord and chat with me or FoamyGuy or the other folks, you can go to adafru.it/discord to hop in the Discord channel. If you enjoyed this, both Tim and I are sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython and the broader ecosystem of CircuitPython. So if you want to support me and support FoamyGuy, you can go to Adafruit.com, purchase some hardware there. Yep, deep dives happen every week. They will be switching. We forgot to talk about what what FoamyGuy is going to call them, but FoamyGuy will be taking over this time slot, the 2 p.m. Pacific time slot, while I'm out and while I'm not doing the deep dives. Thanks again to them for doing that. And thank you all for hopping in. If you want to go back and watch the back catalog of my streams, David DCD has been awesome in taking notes, and Patrick has aggregated them into one GitHub repo, which makes it really easy to search and link into the videos for the particular parts you want to see. You can do that by going to github.com/adafruit/deep-dive-notes. And if folks want to hang out with FoamyGuy on Fridays and take notes too, that would be awesome as well. And FoamyGuy says he's going to keep the deep dive name, so we'll have deep dives with FoamyGuy on Fridays going forward. So thanks again to FoamyGuy for that. And I'll see you all in the Discords. I'll be popping into some show and tells, and we'll still be doing the CircuitPython weeklies up until the baby comes, and then I'll be taking 6 weeks off. And when I'm back, I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to start doing deep dives again myself. That's kind of something to talk with FoamyGuy and PT and Lamore about. So if you want all the latest updates from me, the Discord's the place to be. So thank you all. I'll go to cat cam, pet the cats, and we'll call it a week. And we'll see you on the Discords next week. Thank you all. So let's go to cat cam. I gotta unhook myself. Kitties. One kitty, two kitty. Vin started purring. She was excited.